We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon edition, Air Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Air Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Actually think we got a pretty jam-packed show considering that it is only Tuesday and we have a monster slate of college hoops coming on Tuesday night into Wednesday. So we'll do our normal Wednesday show, but we had to get out the Tuesday show here. And we got a lot to talk about. So Duke wins their last home game of the regular season on Monday night. They beat a very not good Wake Forest team. And I got to sit here and say, is it possible that the weakness of the ACC is going to hurt Duke long-term come NCAA tournament time? I think the answer might be yes. From there, I do have a Cooper Flagg conspiracy theory. There's a lot of talk. Could he possibly come back? He said he wants to come back. I don't think he's coming back. But I think we are going to get a player of his caliber coming back to college basketball in the near future. And it's not even necessarily for the reason that you think. From there, we'll hit on some other odds and ends. Kentucky appears as though they finally got some good injury news. So that's great news for Kentucky. We'll discuss that heading into their game against LSU on Tuesday. And then, oh, by the way, we will wrap with we'll talk a little bit about the ACC, which apparently is alive, hanging on by a thread. But Clemson and Florida State have figured things out there. And we'll wrap with some other odds and ends from across the world of college sports. Quickly, before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. We really do appreciate your support of the channel, of the podcast. Our audience continues to grow. We're closing in on 51,000 subscribers. Cannot believe the growth. We just hit 50,000. Can we get to 60 before the end of the NCAA tournament? I think we can, but not without your support. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, before we get started, you already know what we got to do. I want to thank our friends. I want to thank our partners. They're back with us for March and March Madness. Yeah, you see their logo at the top of the screen, BetUS and BetUS Sportsbook. Okay, so listen, we worked with BetUS last year. I said it on Sunday's show. I'll say it again. One of the best partners we've ever had. I love working with them. I think they love working with Torres. So many of you guys supported BetUS and supported this show by signing up for BetUS last year. And I know you're going to do it again this year. We'll be in the Final Four on behalf of BetUS. So they have been an incredible partner. But here's the incredible thing about BetUS. They have the best deal going for first-time users as we get set for March Madness 2025. This deal is unbelievable, okay? So first-time users of BetUS Sportsbook, first-time signups, first-time deposits. How about this? A 150% deposit match, okay? So in other words, you put in $100, they're going to give you $150 for free to play with. Then if somehow you lose that, now you won't, but somehow if you do, guess what? The second and third deposits, they also give you a 125% match. So in other words, put in 100. They give you 150. Somehow you lose that, you put in another 100, they give you 125. If you lose that, you put in another 100, they give you another $125 in free play. And so we appreciate BetUS for this incredible offer that they have, courtesy of the Aaron Torres Pod. If you want to take advantage of this offer, we will put a link in the show description. All you got to do, click that link, make your first deposit, and use promo code YouTube150 at checkout. That's YouTube150 in the BetUS Sportsbook. We appreciate BetUS's support. And oh, by the way, guess what? Because I'm feeling friendly, it's a Tuesday afternoon. We got a loaded Tuesday slate. I'm going to give you my official Tuesday College Hoops best bet. For those of you who listen on Wednesday, you can see if Torres looks smart or really dumb. My best bet for Tuesday night, my BetUS best bet, it is the Auburn Tigers -4.5 at Texas A&M. Okay, I know, really hot take, taking the number one team in the country as a 4.5 point favorite. But listen, to me, Auburn, they don't slow down on the road. I mean, remember, people want to say, oh, they're going on the road after just barely, after destroying Kentucky the other day. Well, listen, they were a small favorite against Alabama on the road, destroyed them. They were a small favorite against Kentucky on the road, destroyed them. They were a small favorite against Ole Miss on the road, destroyed them. This is a team that has not had any letdowns. I know A&M has lost 4 in a row and needs to play their best basketball. I just think A&M is who they are at this point. Auburn, I would argue, has basically had one bad game all year that was against the Florida Gators at home. They've showed up every other night. I know they won the SEC outright title on Saturday with their win against Kentucky and with Tennessee's win over Bama. I don't think they slow down. I think Auburn goes to Texas A&M and gets the win. I'll say 80-68, but my best bet is the Auburn Tigers -4.5. If you want to tail that one, if you want to tail any bets, again, betus.com will give you the link. Use code YouTube150 at checkout. Really quickly, should mention before we get started as well, one more quick reminder. We got to get to this show because we got so much to discuss. But we got our March Madness, or March is for Day Drinking t-shirts are also available. Okay, so listen, this is the must-have shirt for the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. We're now like 10 days away from the start of the NCAA tournament. You need the gear for when you're sitting in the sports book, you're sitting with your buddies, you're sitting at the bar, and you're betting and watching college hoops all day. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be day drinking. And so you need your March is for Day Drinking t-shirt. It is the official AT Media t-shirt. If you want to support the show, if you want to support everything that we do, all you got to do, go to aarontorresonline.com/merchandise, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. You will find our March is for Day Drinking t-shirts there. Make sure to get yours now so you have it for the start of the NCAA tournament next week. With that said, it's a busy Tuesday afternoon in college hoops. There is no more time, no way. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Listen, Monday in college hoops, I actually credit ESPN. I thought they put on 2 what we thought would be very entertaining games. Houston, Kansas. Listen, as someone who's been a Kansas critic over the last couple months, credit to Kansas. They showed up ready to play, had a chance to beat Houston. Houston ends up winning. They're an incredible story. But to me, I think the bigger story, if you will, actually came in the first game on ESPN on Monday night. It was Duke hosting Wake Forest. Now, this game was significant for 2 different reasons. One, it was Cooper Flagg's very likely last game at Duke, at Cameron Indoor, last home game as a Duke Blue Devil, okay? Listen, we're going to get to the narrative about he's coming back for another year of college. He's not coming back, but we'll discuss that because I do have a conspiracy theory on it. But at the same time, the story was about Cooper Flagg playing his last game at Cameron. They have a couple seniors, but then also it was about Wake Forest, right? We all know, because we've been talking about it all year, the ACC is not very good in basketball. Right now, if the season ended today, there's only 3 teams going to the NCAA tournament: Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. And then very much on the bubble, needing help, North Carolina, Wake Forest, and SMU. And so you come into this game, Wake Forest has taken a couple bad losses in the last few weeks, and you sit there and say, is it possible that they show up ready to play and that they pull off the upset against Duke that maybe pushes them in the tournament for good? No, not even close. Final score 93-60. What was crazy, I watched this whole game. It was awful, by the way. And Duke's awesome. So it's not like, I'm rooting against Duke. But I bring it up because score was like 4-2 after the first TV timeout. And it was really ugly for like the first probably 8 minutes. And so the fact that Duke ended up putting up 93 points, it shows you how good they are, but also maybe, as we're going to discuss here now over the coming few minutes, maybe how not good the rest of the ACC is, okay? And so when I look at this game, listen, I do think there is now officially a conversation watching this game, but watching this team, really just a big picture conversation of, is Duke going to be hurt in the NCAA tournament? Because they basically haven't been tested for 2.5 months in the ACC. I think about the fact that Gonzaga, for years, we always said, well, Gonzaga, they play in this terrible, mediocre conference. How are they going to handle it in March? Well, if we talked about Gonzaga like that, shouldn't we also talk about Duke in the same way? Because coming into this game, Wake Forest was 4th in the ACC standings. On paper, a team that was supposed to hang with Duke, and instead they get blown out. Now, part of this, obviously it goes without saying, some of this is certainly a credit to Duke, right? And anytime anybody in the national media says anything negative about Duke, it instantaneously becomes, oh, Torres hates Duke. This guy hates Duke. That guy hates Duke. No, Duke is awesome, okay? Duke is a phenomenal team, and they deserve the credit that they're getting this season. I think even the most ardent North Carolina fans, Kentucky fans, UConn fans, whoever are the schools that hate Duke the most, will acknowledge, yeah, this team is actually really awesome in 2025, okay? And so Duke is playing really well. They deserve credit. We know the stat, top 10 in offense, top 10 in defense. They get it done. But you watched Wake Forest and you said, if this is a bubble team, the ACC, if this is the fourth best team in the ACC is in trouble because, listen, at some point, Duke is awesome. But at some point, did you watch the game? Did you see that Wake Forest in the first half alone had 3 shot clock violations? Did you see in the first half alone that Wake Forest had a separate 0 for 10 streak from the field? At some point, you could play really good defense. At some point, the other team just isn't good. And so when I look at the ACC, let's think about where this league is right now. As I said, only 3 teams that are in line to make the NCAA tournament. North Carolina, I think, is on the bubble, but look at North Carolina. 1-12, 1-11, whatever it is, against quad 1 teams. They have 1 win against really good teams. SMU, 0 quad 1 wins. That's why these teams aren't in the NCAA tournament field, because they haven't beaten anybody worth noting. And so when I look at the state of the ACC, we could go through all the things, top 25, top 10, how many teams are here, how many teams are in this, how many teams are that. I think the most jarring thing that I've seen is a tweet that my buddy Nick Coffey sent out for the old school OG listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Nick Coffey was basically my co-host. He's a host in Louisville, does Monday through Friday, I think 3 to 6 Eastern time. But Nick Coffey put out a tweet about 2 weeks ago that really just opened my eyes to the state of the ACC. Producer Matt, if we have that tweet, let's go ahead and pop it up. So Nick Coffey, who covers Louisville, he put out this tweet. Available ACC jobs: Miami, Virginia, and Florida State. Remember, Miami and Virginia, both coaches retired interim head coach. Florida State, Leonard Hamilton is retiring at the end of the year. Then he said ACC jobs that should be available soon: Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Pitt, Boston College. In other words, those are jobs that probably should open even if they won't. And then he definitely said 2 jobs that should open but won't are North Carolina and NC State. And so all you have to do is look at that tweet, because right now there are 18 teams in the ACC, and you could legitimately argue, first of all, about 15 to 20% are already open. And you could legitimately argue the fact that probably about half should open this year. Now, part of it is some of the reasons these schools aren't opening, they're just not serious basketball schools. Boston College hasn't tried in 20 years. Virginia Tech, we found out this week, Mike Young, their head coach, is coming back, and they're just going to give him a little bit more NIL money. I don't know that NIL solves the fact that you're not trying and that you're not competing. And so that is the difference to me with the ACC and all these other leagues. Listen, you can criticize the Big 10, the Big 12, whatever. But listen, I'll say this is, like, as somebody who's kind of made fun of the Big 12, Big 10 for a while, Big 10 has 8-9 teams that could beat just about anybody on any given night. UCLA is a good team. Wisconsin's a good team. Remember, Wisconsin beat Arizona earlier in the year. Who else? Illinois, I still think is good. Now, I know what people will say. Well, Duke just played Illinois and they destroyed them, Torres. Why are you not giving? Well, Illinois was going through a 2-week period where everybody got the flu in that building, and they basically had a different starting lineup for 2 straight weeks. Illinois has gotten back. They've gotten better. They've gotten this. They've gotten that. Michigan, good, bad, whatever. You can say whatever you want. Michigan has some good wins throughout the season. Michigan State has some good wins throughout the season. And by the way, Michigan State beat North Carolina. Perfect example. And so I just bring it up because if you look at the ACC, most of these leagues at least have like 5-6 teams top middle that are pretty good that can beat you on any given night. The Big 12, I think, has about 6-7 teams that if you play them on the wrong night, look at Kansas. I mean, Kansas is not good, but they nearly won at Houston the other night. They did beat Iowa State earlier in the year. They did be like, you go through the other leagues. The Big East has 5-6 teams that can kind of beat you on any given night. Not just UConn, St. John's, Marquette at the top, but Creighton, but Xavier, but whatever. You get the point. The ACC is so bad. And I just go to the fact that, like, you look at the ACC and you look at the NCAA tournament, I just do wonder if Duke will be truly tested by the time they get to the NCAA tournament. And so you look at Duke, You look at what their potential draw could be, and I think there's a few variables. They're a really good team. Nobody would doubt it. But have they been tested enough? We don't know. But the other thing is the teams that they're going to play have certainly been tested more than they have, right? So like in Joe Lunardi's most recent bracket, Joe Lunardi, I think he dropped this on Tuesday morning, Monday night, whatever. They have Duke as the number 1 seed. You know who's the 8-9 game in Duke's region right now? Right now, if the tournament ended today, if tournament started today, according to Joe Lunardi, the 8-9 game is UConn Vanderbilt. The winner of that game plays Duke. Well, UConn, you could say whatever you want about them. They've been disappointing this year. We all overrated Dan Hurley's ability to get any team to play at the high. Like I'm not blaming the players. I'm not blaming the coaches. I'm not blaming the coaches. I'm just saying they're not as good as we thought. But you put UConn on a neutral floor with Duke. Duke's got a bunch of freshmen, a couple seniors, whatever. And UConn's got 3 guys that have won multiple national championships in their starting lineup. UConn's not going to be afraid. Vanderbilt. Listen, you can say whatever you want about Vanderbilt. Can't say they're not tested. Beat Tennessee this year, beat Kentucky this year. They played Kentucky and Tennessee twice apiece. They played Auburn, just beat Missouri. Can't say they're not battle tested. Duke really hasn't been battle tested in 2 months. And here's the other thing. Even against the good ACC teams, it's not like they were great. Lost at Clemson. Nobody's blaming them for losing at Clemson. Nobody thought they were going 20-0 in the league, not even me. Oh, by the way, they played Louisville in December and still almost lost to Louisville. So I could go on, but I think this is something worth monitoring. I think it's worth monitoring. How bad is the ACC? Remember, Duke is a young team with a bunch of freshmen, and I do wonder if they are going to be battle-tested enough come tournament time, because one thing you could say about these Big 12, these SEC teams, even the Big 10, you can't say they're not battle-tested. That's the other thing, too. Think about these venues. Like, again, let's criticize Kansas for whatever. Last couple road games, at Houston, at BYU, those are monster tough road games. Duke's going to Miami where they're playing in front of 2,000 people and probably 1,000 of them are Duke fans. Whatever. You go on and on down the list. So we'll see. I don't want to discredit Duke because they are a very, very good team. But I also do think it is worth asking how tough the competition is in the ACC, how much it will hurt them going forward. Really quick, before we get to a break, I do want to drop a little bit of a Cooper Flagg conspiracy theory, okay? Let's play some X-Files music. Do, 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 do. Remember the X-Files? Conspiracy theories, aliens, whatever. All right, so this is the deal, okay? So over the last couple weeks, there's kind of been this conversation about Cooper Flagg potentially returning to Duke. And it's funny because it actually started with an Athletic article. The Athletic did this long-form piece with him. I think it was maybe his first, written sit-down of the year. I think he's done some TV stuff. I don't know how many written profiles have been done of him, but I think this was kind of the first sit-down interview he's done off camera. And it was a good piece. It was done by the Athletic. I forget. I think Brandon Marks and Brandon Quinn or something like that. I can't remember. It was a good piece though. It was an excellent piece. I remember because I was reading it while I was taking my wife's car to get serviced at the service station. Okay, so I bring it up because I read the piece, and at the end of that story, there was just this interesting little quote from Cooper Flagg. He really didn't say very much in the article, and he just kind of said in passing, like, "Yeah, man, I wish I could come back for another year." And so I read it, didn't think anything of it. And then I look up over the next few days and I see this kind of headline just start to emerge and pick up steam of like, could Cooper Flagg return for another year of college basketball? Will Cooper Flagg come back to Duke? As you can see at the bottom of the screen, after Duke removed Cooper Flagg from the game on Monday night against Wake Forest, the fans were chanting, one more year, one more year, one more year. It all started from this Athletic article, and here is where the conspiracy theory comes in. I don't believe that Cooper Flagg is coming back for another year of college basketball. I don't believe that. But what I do believe, this is my hot take. I've been chewing on it for weeks. I haven't yet spit it out to the public, but I believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, I believe that there will be a player of Cooper Flagg's ability. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be as talented as Cooper Flagg, but I'm talking a potential number 1, number 2, number 3, no doubt about it, pick in the draft that is going to say no to the NBA and is going to say yes to returning to college basketball for another season or two and it's not going to be for the reason that you think, and it's not going to be the people that are going to be driving that decision aren't who you think. But I've been thinking about this one for a while, so let me spit it out, okay? So first of all, the idea that Cooper Flagg wants to return to college basketball for another year, it's not surprising. Every one and done kid ever has wanted to come back for a second year, and many of them have explained it publicly, right? Like, Donovan Clingan, who wasn't even a one and done, he was a two and done. There was a story about him last year around the NBA draft. It's like, he went into Dan Hurley's office and said, is there a way we can do this for another year? And Dan Hurley said, no, he pushed him out the door. Anthony Davis has publicly said, I wanted to come back to Kentucky. Coach Cal pushed me out the door. DeMarcus Cousins, for the OG people who know my background, I wrote a book about the 2010 Kentucky Wildcats. I remember talking to Dwayne Peavy, who's now the AD at DePaul, who was at Kentucky at the time, saying, DeMarcus Cousins told Coach Cal, don't recruit another big guy. I'm coming back for another year. By the way, Zion, I think people forget this. Zion was like the last person to declare in 2019. And I think there was even like video of him playing pickup at the Duke Rec Center, like the day of the NBA draft deadline. And it was very clear, like, this is my last moment to be a kid. I'm going to enjoy it. So it's not surprising that Cooper Flagg wants to come back. It's also not surprising the reason why we have never really had a super duper high profile player come back. And it's because of the money in the NBA. And it's not just money in the NBA. It's the guaranteed money from these NBA contracts. And I get it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot more money than even the biggest college basketball brand could provide. For fun, I decided to look it up because I was just curious. One, I'd love to know how many of you even remember who was the first pick in the NBA draft last year. A guy by the name of Zachary Richichet from, he plays for the Atlanta Hawks. I think he's from France originally. But I looked it up. 4-year guaranteed $57 million deal. That is really hard to turn down to return to college basketball. And I think if that's just your argument, nobody's ever going to turn down that much guaranteed money, then okay, I get it. And I don't think Cooper Flagg is going to be the first to do it. But what I do think is there are some things changing behind the scenes that I think is going to lead to somebody of Cooper Flagg's ability to return to college for another year. Those things, it's not just NIL, but it's more specifically, it's the NIL that basically the best basketball players specifically can get in college basketball, okay? Because when we talk NIL, here's the thing. I think we have to separate NIL paid by the school from true NIL opportunities, brand deals, all that good stuff. The starting, the backup offensive guard at Georgia gets paid something, right? That's from the school. We can call it NIL. It's basically pay for play, okay? Cooper Flagg, Paige Beckers at UConn, on the other hand, they have true NIL. Paige Beckers has a Nike deal. I believe she has a Dunkin' Donuts deal. Like, Paige Beckers is probably, in my opinion, actually the highest paid athlete in college sports right now. I'd also guess Cooper Flagg isn't far behind, because Cooper Flagg, I'm sure, is getting something from the Duke Collective. And oh, by the way, he has a shoe deal with New Balance, and he has a deal with Gatorade. And so if I had to guess, I think Cooper Flagg's probably easily making $6, $7, $8 million a year playing college basketball this year. It sounds crazy, but think about it. We know the top college basketball players this past portal cycle were getting $2+ million. Coleman Hawkins got it. Grado Support Washington got it. So, let's say about $2 million from Duke. New Balance signed Cooper Flagg. You think they're doing that you think he's wearing New Balances for free? Let's what is it? $1 million, $2 million, $3 million for 1 year? Again, Gatorade. You think he's just drinking Gatorade because he likes, Purple Frost? No. He's doing it because Gatorade's paying him something. And so again, I think you start tallying all these things up really quick. I think you start to get to $6, $7, $8, $9 million a year very quickly. By the way, look at AJ DeBonsa next year. AJ DeBonsa, listen, I don't think it's hyperbole. AJ DeBonsa could make $10 million a year playing $10 million next year playing college basketball. Now, I think the reports of how much BYU is paying him are a little bit extreme. We've talked about that. People were reporting 6, 7, 8, 9 million, whatever it was. I think BYU is probably going to pay him about 4, though. I think it's going to be about 4. And we know that he's already got some brand deals lined up. You know how I know? Go back to First Take. Go back to when he committed that day. Do you remember what he was wearing? He was wearing a Red Bull hat. I don't think he was wearing a Red Bull hat because he just found it in the closet and he was fired up to be on First Take. That was obviously a brand deal. AJ DeBonsa, by the way, I'm pretty sure had a deal with Nike that expires this coming season. So how valuable is he to Nike in college basketball? 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever, Red Bull, another whatever. All of a sudden you get to 10 really quick. And so to me, this is where it gets interesting. To me, this is where I believe that a player of Cooper Flagg's abilities is going to come back. Because this is my opinion, okay? But in my opinion, just think about this. I don't think it's going to be the schools that force this kid back. I think, or any kid back. What I do think it will be, though, I think it'll be agents. And you know who I think is really going to be a driver in this? I think it's going to be the shoe companies, okay? Because shoe companies now can sign NIL deals with these kids. And so if you're going to invest millions of dollars in these kids, you want the marketability opportunities to be at their peak, right? I mean, whatever the contract is, I don't know exactly how all these NIL deals work with shoe deals and college versus the pros, but what I do know is this. I do know that you're trying to get some bang for your buck. And I was thinking about this with Cooper Flagg watching him on Monday night against Wake Forest. Think about this. Cooper Flagg, 40 games at Duke as a freshman. What will we argue? About 8 to 10 to 12, maybe plus of them are really high-profile games. Kentucky, which was basically opening night. Kansas, which was right before Thanksgiving. You had the Arizona game. I don't know if I would call that super high-profile. But Kansas, Kentucky, 2 games against Carolina. ACC tournament's going to be rocking. NCAA tournament's going to be rocking. And so if you think about that, I just want you to do a simple math equation, okay? Duke is going to play on national TV 40 times. How many times this year have you seen the Washington Wizards on national TV? How many times a year have you seen the Charlotte Hornets on national? It's not very many. And so I've been thinking about this for weeks. If you're Nike and you want to get the bang for your buck for Cooper Flagg or AJ DeBonsa or Cam Boozer or whoever you think is the next big thing, is there more marketability with Cooper Flagg playing for a Duke team that's on national TV every night and probably has 7, 8, 9 super high-profile games? Or is he more marketable for you with the Washington Wizards, maybe 1 national TV game a year? I think the shoe companies are going to figure this out. I think the shoe companies are going to push it. Now, listen, I don't think Cooper Flagg or any Cooper Flagg type player is going to stay for 4 years, but could you stay a second year? Could you maybe stay a third year? Why not? If you're making $8, $10, $12 million a year, if you got a Nike deal that pays you $4, $5, $6 million a year, and you don't want to go to the Washington Wizards and Nike or Adidas or whoever doesn't really want you on the Washington Wizards, I think it makes a lot of sense. So that is a hot take that Torres has been chewing on for some time, and I really do believe that it's going to happen. By the way, we talked a little bit about this with Reed Sheppard last year around the NBA draft deadline. I said, look, that kid is going to make more money in NIL. Basically, he's more valuable even to Nike as a star at Kentucky than he is as a backup wherever he goes, and I think we've seen that play out with Reed Sheppard and the Houston Rockets. So that's my hot, spicy Cooper Flagg conspiracy theory. Yeah, I believe it. Next 3 to 5 years. A Cooper Flagg type talent is going to return to college basketball for at least 1 more year. You heard it on the Torres pod first. If it happens, you're going to think about it. The good news is if it doesn't happen, you'll never remember this segment happened. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, just hit on some other news and notes. Midweek, we got a bunch of big games coming tonight. But I want to hit on Kentucky, maybe finally getting some good injury news for a change. The ACC appears to finally be figuring things out. And I got a couple other takes. We haven't talked much football, but I got an NFL draft combine take. So we got a lot to get to. Kentucky injuries, ACC's future. Quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting. Sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. It's a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Filebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. Oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly, not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to fioboc.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at F-I-O-B-O-C. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So let's go ahead and rip through some of the other stories from the day. Busy Tuesday night in college hoops. We'll probably do a Wednesday morning show, so 11:30 Eastern time, somewhere in there. Lot to discuss today, though. Before we do, you know what time it is. It is time to thank our friends. It is time to thank our partners. It's time to thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com, okay? So listen, by now I've told you all about Collie Puffs, but listen, it's March Madness, right? You've made your bets with BetUS. By the way, Torres' best bet for tonight is Auburn -4.5, but you've made your best bets. You're sitting on the couch. It's March. You're going to be watching a lot of basketball over the next month or so. So you need a snack that is both healthy, but also delicious as well. My friends, my people, I appreciate everybody's support. This is what you need Collie Puffs, okay? Listen, I've told you all about Collie Puffs, family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, who I was just emailing with before the show, is the founder. And he's a huge football fan, Rams season ticket holder. And he was sitting on the couch one day watching football, and he said, you know what? I need myself a snack that is both healthy, but isn't going to make me look like a filthy slob, something that I'm going to love, something that my kids are going to love, healthy and delicious. Well, folks, he came up with Collie Puffs. And, of course, their website, ColliePuffs.com. Collie Puffs, what you need to know, they're baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients, but the best part is they taste delicious. As I said, you'll like them, your kids will like them, your grandkids will like them. My dog even likes them when a couple of them fall on the floor. And for more information, you need to try them out for yourself. That's all I'm trying to say. So for more information, is what I need you to do. Go visit ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com, ColliePuffs.com. Also, you can get them on Amazon.com. So you're on Amazon, you got a bunch of stuff in your cart, don't even want to know everything that's in there, you filthy, disgusting freak. But what you do need is some Collie Puffs, okay? Throw some Collie Puffs in at checkout. They'll be in your cart. You can try them for yourself. Just trust me, you're going to like them. I've had so many of you reach out to me and tell me how much you've enjoyed them. So thank you for your support of Collie Puffs and this show. Again, ColliePuffs.com, ColliePuffs.com, also available on Amazon. With that said, do want to go ahead and switch gears and listen, you know, the tough thing about doing a Tuesday afternoon show is that there's going to be so many stories that change throughout the day into the evening, especially during college hoop season. And so Kentucky is getting ready to play LSU, okay? Kentucky, it's senior day. There's a lot of pomp. There's a lot of circumstance. They're saying goodbye, if you will, to a lot of the guys that kind of came in and helped change the program in year one under Mark Pope. But I think what's worth noting, there is an interesting note about senior day and one guy that doesn't appear as though he will be honored on senior day. It is guard Kerr Kriisa. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the story. Interesting note from the other day. But like I said, you know, it's been an up and down year for Kentucky. Listen, I've said it. I feel bad. I do because, you know, my whole thing is, listen, only one team's going to win the national championship. It's going to be whoever. Maybe this year it's Auburn. Maybe this year it's Houston, Kentucky, Duke, whatever. But you want to see everybody at full strength. You want to see everybody at full strength and kind of just see how the chips fall. And if your team's not good enough, they're not good enough. And that's just part of sports and part of life. Okay. Well, I bring it up because Kentucky is a little bit different in that we saw them at full strength and they're awesome. And they beat a lot of really good teams. They beat Duke at full strength. They beat Florida at full strength, pretty close to full strength. They beat Gonzaga at pretty close to full strength. How about this? They swept Tennessee not at full strength. And so this is a team that at their best, I still believe can play with just about anybody. By the way, close to full strength against Alabama. That was back and forth, could have gone either way the first time those two teams played at Rupp. So in my opinion, that was a team that could absolutely play with anybody, but the injuries have just been devastating and they just continue to mount day after day after day, game after game after game. And you really have to kind of go back to like basically early part of December when this team was at full strength. We know Jackson Robinson's out for the year. He's been dealing with that wrist injury for about 3-4 weeks, tried to come back, couldn't play. Lamont Butler was out with the shoulder injury, comes back, hurts it again. Now he's back. Again, we're recording before the LSU game, but feels like he's at less than 100%. Andrew Carr in and out of the lineup. But the one that started this all, it was Kerr Kriisa back in that Gonzaga game back in December. People were like, oh, he's not really playing that well. It turns out he had a freaking broken foot, basically, okay? And so since he hurt that foot, there's been talk about, could he be back in 6 to 8 weeks? Could he be back by early February? Could he be back by late February? And I think Mark Pope has said all the right things, and I think Kerr Kriisa has said all the right things too. I don't know that he's done any media availability, but I do remember him chatting with a fan on a video that got recorded or whatever. And he basically told the fan I just want to play this year. I want to help this team this year. But as time has gone on, it feels like he's not coming back. And because he played so few games, it appears as though he could potentially get a medical redshirt. Well, that's not just my opinion. That's not just speculation, but it appears as though Mark Pope confirmed that in his call-in show on Monday. So on Monday night, all of the guys who are going to be honored at Senior Day for Kentucky had a dinner. It was Lamont Butler. It was Jackson Robinson. It was Ansley Almanor. It was Amari Williams. It was Andrew Carr. It might have been one or two other guys as well. But the guy that was most notably not there was Kerr Kriisa. Well, on his show, Mark Pope dropped some interesting quotes. Producer Matt, if you have the great Jack Pilgrim's tweet, go ahead and pop that up. Jack Pilgrim tweeted out, Mark Pope said tonight, Kerr Kriisa was not invited to the dinner, only players officially out of eligibility. Mark Pope said, quote, on the show, it's just for the guys that have zero college eligibility left, just those 6 guys. Kerr's got another year left, which is fantastic for all of us, right? Gotta say, that sure does sound like Mark Pope saying that Kerr Kriisa is going to come back without actually saying it. And so what I would say about that is a couple things. One, first of all, for the last time, I promise, we are recording before the LSU game on Tuesday. So there's a very good chance that Mark Pope will address this at some point in the post-game media availability. Maybe it becomes official by the time that you listen to this. But what I would just say, this is a great piece of news for Kentucky basketball. I think it's a good piece of news for Kerr Kriisa as well. One, first of all, don't want to rush back. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if there's potential for long-term injury. I'll leave that up to the doctors, okay? But at the same time, I do think if you rush back, you run the risk of potentially hurting yourself on a more permanent long-term basis. So you don't want to rush back. And I think at this point, you don't want to rush back to a team that's kind of banged up anyway. I mean, are you rushing back to a team that, again, we don't know how healthy Lamont Butler is. Jackson Robinson's out for the year. Andrew Carr's been dealing with a back injury. So you're not returning to a team that I think any of us right now feel like, okay, they're in that upper tier, the way we felt after the Duke game, after the Florida game, etc. You're returning to a team that's inherently flawed, inherently banged up, and maybe it just isn't Kentucky's season. I think beyond that, for Kerr Kriisa, it makes a ton of sense. Get healthy, but more importantly, with due respect, you're not an NBA player, okay? We just spent a ton of time talking about Cooper Flagg, how much money he could be making in college, how much money he will make as the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. But the truth of the matter is, let's call it what it is. Kerr Kriisa is not an NBA player. As somebody who kind of sort of knows what these European contracts look like, I don't think he's in line to get crazy money as a pro next year if he decides to go pro. Now, if he decides to go pro, I have no problem with it. But the bottom line is college basketball is now paying more than really just about anything other than basically first-round guaranteed NBA contracts. It's just the truth. And so if you're Kerr Kriisa, after not playing for the last 2 months, you're going to declare, you're going to try to go through the draft process, you're going to go through the draft process after not having played high-leverage basketball for the last 2 months. Doesn't really make sense to me. And so it makes sense to come back. And I would lastly say from the Kentucky side of things, you got to be fired up. Because if you look at the state of Kentucky basketball next year, I think it's actually probably in a little bit better shape than I would have said maybe a month and a half ago. Bottom line is all those freshmen that got called into action, all those young guys that got called into action, they're all stepping up and delivering in a way that I don't think I thought they would. I don't think I thought Trent Noah was going to be this good. I don't think I thought Travis Perry was going to be this good. I don't think I thought Colin Chandler was going to be this good. So all of those guys have gotten valuable reps. You have the 3 really talented freshmen coming in, Caden Lewis, Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno. But those aren't three freshmen that are just going to come in and dominate college basketball. No disrespect, but they're not Cooper Flagg. They're not Cade Cunningham. They're not Zion Williamson. They're not Anthony Davis. They're not De'Aaron Fox. And so to have a potential veteran point guard on your roster to help those guys, I just think you got to be fired up if you're a Kentucky fan. Listen, fired up is relative, right? You don't want injuries. You don't want guys being hurt. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that in a perfect world, he plays this year, the whole team's healthy, and he compete for a national championship. But he is hurt. He's not rushing back. Now you have a sixth-year point guard who, by the way, has won a Big 12 or won a Pac-12 regular season title, has won a Pac-12 tournament title, has been part of multiple, at least one number one seed, has played at three. He's a vet. He's going to be 25 years old next year. He just turned 24. That's the kind of guy you want in that locker room for those young guys and really a young roster in general where you have a couple freshmen that roles grew this year, but how much? And then three really young freshmen as well. So if you're a Kentucky fan, again, in a perfect world, you would have loved to have this kid, no issues, no whatever, but the world isn't perfect. And if you're going to get him back, you could do a lot worse than getting him back, getting him back with next year's team that, as I see being pointed out in the chat, you have two freshman guards on this year's team. You're going to have two freshmen next year. It's going to be good to have a sixth-year guy, and it appears as though Kerr Kriisa will be back. All right, a couple other notes before we get out of here, okay? So back in the day, I used to do a segment called Where Aaron Was Right, Where Aaron Was Wrong, where we would hit on all the big topics across the world of sports, some of the stuff that I got right, some of the stuff I got wrong. Why do I bring it up? It is because we got news on Monday afternoon into Tuesday about the future of the ACC. Remember, Florida State, Clemson have been desperately trying to get out of the ACC for about 2.5 years by now. I have told you for years, I have not seen the scenario where it's going to happen. Well, I bring it up because on Tuesday, Clemson and Florida State, who are both suing the ACC, have dropped their lawsuits and are now with the conference. They say through the end of their TV contract in 2036, probably, though, realistically, they are in this conference until 2030. And I'll say this, conference realignment, it appears as though it is going to hit a back burner here now for at least 5 years. By the way, can't we all be grateful for that? Okay. So let's go back to the ACC and Clemson, the ACC, Florida State and Clemson. Okay. I think you can go back to many years ago, long before we had producer Matt, long before this was a video podcast. Okay. I remember the day that Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving for the SEC, or even not even they announced. The report came out at SEC Media Days. It was July of 2021. My buddy Mark Ryan, who at the time hosted radio in South Carolina covering Clemson, he put out a tweet that said Florida State and Clemson have engaged the SEC about potentially joining the league. And all the big J journalists, who's this local guy? He doesn't know what he's talking about, this and that. And I said, one, I trust Mark more than I trust some reporter that's 2,000 miles away. But two, what I said was, of course, Clemson and Florida State engaged the SEC. It doesn't mean that the SEC called back. It doesn't mean that they offered them a spot. It doesn't mean that they're impending members. But you go back 4 or 5 years, I said, listen, Clemson and Florida State are going to try to get out because, as we saw 4 or 5 years ago, and as we certainly see now, if you're not in the SEC and if you're not in the Big Ten, then you're always going to be chasing and trying to get into one of those two leagues. Those two leagues have better TV contracts, better revenue, and that revenue is significant at a place like Florida State and Clemson. Florida State and Clemson see themselves as the equals of Florida, of South Carolina, of the SEC, of the Big Ten. Clemson's won a national championship. Florida State's won a national championship more than basically all but 5-6 schools. I mean, Florida State won a championship a decade ago. So it's not like they've been, terrible forever. By the way, they were 13-0 last year and won the ACC 2 seasons ago. And so I just bring it up because they've always seen those schools as their equals. And we've always talked about how bad this ACC TV deal is. We've talked about the fact that really, as the ACC and the Big Ten, or the SEC and the Big Ten are pulling away, those schools are going to be making 50, 60, 70, maybe $80 million a year by the end of their TV deals. The ACC is like $30 million behind. I think 40, 45 million a year in terms of what they're creating in terms of revenue. And so if you're Clemson and Florida State and you're sitting there saying, I'm trying to compete with Florida, I'm trying to compete with Georgia, I'm trying to compete with Auburn, I'm trying to compete with Alabama, I'm trying to compete with whoever, you're $30 million behind every single year. So Auburn has 30 million more than Florida State this year, but then they also have 30 million more next year and the year after and the year after. And eventually you just get into a hole too big to dig yourself out of. Okay. We've talked about this consistently. It's not just NIL. It's not just this. It's not just that. It's the ability for Olympic sports to compete. It's the ability for certainly NIL, but it's the ability to keep good assistant coaches. It's the ability to keep coordinators. It's the ability to have these front offices now that every college football team and college basketball team has. And so Florida State and Clemson were freaking out, saying, we got to figure out a way to make more money. And that is why they were suing to get out of the ACC. And so if you go back to what we've talked about, I've said it from the beginning. I said, I never thought it was going to happen. And it was really for two reasons. Okay. And by the way, I don't blame them because they're the two biggest football brands. I get it, whatever. By the way, there's other schools. North Carolina was quietly trying to get out, whatever. But I said there's really two reasons, in my opinion, that it is not going to happen. One, they're not going to be able to get out of the TV deal. And this is where Aaron was right, because I said for years, all I heard was, oh my goodness, well, all these great lawyers, Clemson's going to hire lawyers, and Florida State's going to hire lawyers, and Miami's going to hire lawyers, and North Carolina's going to hire lawyers. And when they hire these great lawyers, they're going to figure out a way to get out of this TV deal. They call it the grant of rights, which basically locks in your TV deal. And I kept saying, well, wait a second now. Clemson may have good lawyers. North Carolina may have good lawyers. You know who else had good lawyers? The ACC, when the original contract was put together. The ACC specifically wrote the contract so none of these schools could get out of it. And so to me, it never made sense that they would just figure out some loophole to get out. And then beyond that, here's the other thing. I never thought that Florida State and Clemson had a great landing spot. I don't believe the SEC really wants them. The SEC has a Florida presence in Florida. They have a South Carolina presence in South Carolina. You know Florida doesn't want them. You know South Carolina doesn't want them. And I'm sorry, this isn't the same as Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is one of the biggest brands in all of college football. It's just a different deal from all perspectives, revenue, this, that, the other thing, than Florida State and Clemson. And so I never believed the SEC wanted them. By the way, never really believed that they were a fit for the Big Ten. You know, the Big Ten likes to get high and mighty with their academics. Always thought North Carolina, maybe a Virginia, maybe a Duke was a better fit for the Big Ten. Probably North Carolina and Virginia. But so I bring it up because I never saw this scenario where there was a great landing spot for Clemson and Florida State. And so I never believed they were leaving, and they have finally come to a resolution and figured it out. Now, there are two very important things as to why this resolution came about, why now, and what it means going forward. Why it happened now, besides the fact that Clemson and Florida State have nowhere to go, I don't believe, is that they have finally come to an understanding on how the revenue will be distributed, okay? And I know this is kind of boring legalese, but I think it is important, okay? Florida State and Clemson have basically argued like, look, if you want us to stay, we have to figure out a better revenue share plan because we're the one creating all the revenue for this league, okay? And I remember, again, we've talked about this story for 4 or 5 years now. I remember Florida State, like 3 years ago, did some study about basically like the number of consumers that watch ACC football. And like Florida State, basically like, you know, I forget what the number was, but it was like 40% of all ACC viewers are watching Florida State games. I don't remember how it was tabulated, and it obviously included Clemson games, and Florida State plays Notre Dame, and they play whoever. But Florida State was like, wait a second, we're creating like 30, 40% of the revenue. Why are we getting the same share as Boston College and Pitt and whatever? And so I never saw the scenario. So I always defended Florida State because I said, I kind of get it, right? If you're creating all the revenue, why do I have to split it evenly? Well, this new contract now distributes it unevenly. That's the important part. The schools that make the college football playoff will get a bigger cut than the schools that don't. Boston College doesn't just get to ride the coattails of Clemson and get a big check because Clemson's taking football seriously and they're not. TV ratings matter. We don't have all the specifics, but basically the teams that bring in more eyeballs are going to get more money. You know who those schools are. It's Florida State, it's Clemson, it's maybe Miami, it's maybe North Carolina. So that's the good news. And then the other thing that I think is worth noting, and this is actually very important. This is the part that to me is actually very important, is that the grant of rights, which allows them to get out of the not the grant of rights, the buyout to get out of the contract, it goes down significantly in 2030. Now, why is that noteworthy? It is because the current Big Ten TV deal expires in 2030. And so basically, it feels as though it's a compromise for the ACC, like, hey, let's just get through these next 5 years and let's see where we don't know where college sports has changed so much in the last year, the last 2 years, the last 5 years. We don't know where we're going to be in 2030. Think about college sports in 2020 compared to 2025. No NIL, no transfer portal. This was all obviously before the pandemic, but like you think about how different college sports is now from 5 years. Where's it going to be 5 years from now? And so basically the ACC is like, look, if you want to, in 5 years, if you have an opportunity to leave, you can reconsider. You'll pay us a lot of money, but whatever. But at least it's not through 2036 when that TV deal ends. So to me, this is a very important moment. I don't think there's going to be any moving and shaking in the ACC between now and 2030. But I believe 2030, that's when you could see some chaos. When that Big Ten TV deal ends, could they want North Carolina? Could they want Virginia? Again, is Duke a factor? Is Miami football a factor? I don't know, but it feels like at least for now, we've got some resolution. And yeah, this was one that I told you pretty much all along was going to be the way that it is. So I guess credit to Torres for ending up being right. Really quickly, you know what? I don't really have much else. I was going to talk a little bit about Shedeur at the combine. There's a lot of Shedeur negativity. I don't know that I have the energy to do it this week. To do it this episode. We've done 51 minutes strong, and we got a busy show tomorrow. So I'll tell you what, I think we'll get out of here. Shedeur, people are mad at him. I think it's all for nothing. Whatever. All right, if you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, do me a favor, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead and give us some quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Tuesday afternoon, a little bit of a quieter time. But guess what? March is here, and we're going to be going live a lot, okay? So next week with conference championships, we're going to have a ton of content. NCAA tournament, we're going to have a ton of content. We'll be in San Antonio, so it's going to be a busy couple weeks. And then guess what? Once we get through that, you know what that means. It's portal season, baby, and we're going to be rocking and rolling and not missing a beat. Time for me to go. Appreciate everybody's support. I'm going to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back Wednesday morning.